The summer beach was crowded with families enjoying the warm afternoon sun and crashing waves. A young woman suddenly collapsed on the sand, her face pale and lifeless, no longer breathing. The crowd panicked and stepped back, unsure how to help. A man carrying his small daughter rushed forward, kneeling down to perform CPR. Minutes later, the woman gasped back to life. He thought he'd simply saved a stranger. Hours later, he discovered she was a billionaire. Daniel Hayes, 35, adjusted the strap of his worn beach bag as he walked across the hot sand with his 7-year-old daughter Emma skipping beside him. His faded t-shirt and patched swim shorts told the story of a man who stretched every dollar. But Emma's bright smile and excited chatter revealed a child who felt rich in love, despite their modest circumstances. As a single father working as a mechanic at Murphy's Auto Shop, Daniel barely made enough to cover rent, groceries, and Emma's school supplies. Their beach trips were rare treats, usually funded by the tips he earned from especially grateful customers. Today's outing was Emma's reward for getting straight A's on her report card. "Daddy, can we build the biggest sandcastle ever?" Emma asked, tugging on his hand as they searched for a good spot to set up their small umbrella. "Absolutely, Princess," Daniel replied, his tired eyes lighting up at her enthusiasm. "We'll make it so big that the crabs will think it's a real palace." Other beachgoers barely glanced at them as they passed. Daniel's calloused hands and sun-weathered face marked him as working class in a beach town where most visitors were wealthy tourists. When he offered to help an elderly couple struggling with their beach umbrella, they politely declined, clearly uncomfortable accepting assistance from someone they perceived as beneath their social status. Some people think money makes them better than others. Daniel had learned to tell Emma when she noticed such interactions. But what really matters is how we treat people when they need help. Emma, wise beyond her years, always nodded solemnly at these lessons, understanding that their small family lived by different values than many of the people around them. They'd been at the beach for about an hour, building their promised sandcastle and collecting shells, when the peaceful afternoon was shattered by screams from the water's edge. "Someone help! She's not breathing!" Daniel looked up to see a crowd gathering around a woman who lay motionless on the wet sand, apparently pulled from the surf by other swimmers. People were shouting suggestions and calling 911, but no one was actually doing anything to help. Without hesitation, Daniel sprinted toward the commotion, his lifeguard training from his teenage years kicking in, despite the 15 years that had passed since he'd needed to use it. "Emma, stay right there," he called over his shoulder as he dropped to his knees beside the unconscious woman. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with dark hair plastered to her head and her lips already turning blue. Daniel checked for a pulse, found none, and immediately began chest compressions. "Has anyone called 911? He shouted to the crowd as he worked, tilting the woman's head back and beginning rescue breathing. Several people confirmed that paramedics were on the way, but Daniel knew that brain damage could occur within minutes without oxygen. He continued CPR, counting compressions and breaths, ignoring the crowd's anxious murmurs and the sand grinding into his knees. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 2 minutes, the woman suddenly coughed up seawater and gasped for air. "She's breathing," Daniel announced, carefully turning her onto her side as she continued coughing up water. The paramedics arrived within minutes, taking over the woman's care and transporting her to the nearest hospital for observation. Daniel watched the ambulance disappear, then returned to Emma, who had been watching the entire rescue with wide, worried eyes. "Is the lady going to be okay, Daddy?" Emma asked, clutching the small seashell she'd been examining when the emergency occurred. "I think so." "Sweetheart," Daniel replied, pulling her close. "The doctors will take good care of her." They spent the rest of the afternoon at the beach, but Daniel found it hard to concentrate on building sandcastles. He kept thinking about the woman's face, how young she'd looked, how close she'd come to drowning. He'd saved lives before during his brief stint as a teenage lifeguard, but it never got easier to see someone so close to death. That evening, as Daniel was giving Emma a bath to wash off the sand and salt, his phone rang with an unknown number. "Mr. Hayes," said a crisp, professional voice, "this is Sarah Chen, personal assistant to Ms. Isabella Carter. The woman you saved today would very much like to meet you and thank you personally. Would you be available tomorrow afternoon?" Daniel was surprised but agreed to meet at the Ocean View Resort, one of the most expensive hotels in town. As he hung up, he realized he had no idea who Isabella Carter was, but the fact that she had a personal assistant suggested she was someone important. The next day, Daniel dropped Emma off at his neighbor's house and drove his 15-year-old pickup truck to the resort, feeling increasingly out of place as he pulled up to the valet stand behind a line of luxury cars. The lobby was all marble and crystal, filled with the kind of people who wore designer clothes to the beach. Daniel had put on his best shirt, a button-down he'd bought for job interviews 3 years ago, but he still felt underdressed and uncomfortable. "Mr. Hayes?" A woman in an elegant business suit approached him. "I'm Sarah Chen. Ms. Carter is waiting for you in the penthouse." The elevator ride to the top floor felt endless. When the doors opened, Daniel stepped into a suite that was larger than his entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean where yesterday's rescue had taken place. "You must be Daniel." He turned to see the woman from the beach, now wearing a casual but obviously expensive outfit, her dark hair styled perfectly. But it was her eyes that struck him, warm and genuinely grateful, without a trace of the condescension he'd expected from someone wealthy enough to afford the penthouse suite. "I'm Isabella Carter," she said, extending her hand. "I owe you my life." "I'm just glad you're okay," Daniel replied, still processing the transformation from the unconscious woman on the beach to this poised, confident person. Anyone would have done the same thing. Isabella smiled at that. "Actually, that's not true. There were dozens of people on that beach, and you were the only one who acted." "Why?" Daniel thought about it for a moment. "I guess because someone needed help, and I knew how to give it. I used to be a lifeguard when I was younger." "Tell me about yourself, Daniel. What do you do now?" For the next hour, they talked about everything. Daniel's work as a mechanic, his life as a single father, Emma's love of school, and her dreams of becoming a marine biologist. Isabella listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions and laughing at his stories about Emma's latest adventures. What surprised Daniel most was how easy it was to talk to her. Despite the obvious wealth gap between them, Isabella treated him as an equal, showing none of the dismissive attitude he'd encountered from other wealthy people. When Emma's seashell fell out of his pocket as he reached for his wallet, Isabella picked it up with a smile. "From yesterday," she asked. "Emma was collecting them when I heard the screaming. She insisted I keep this one to remember the day I saved someone," as she put it. Isabella held the small shell carefully, her expression thoughtful. "Your daughter sounds remarkable. I'd love to meet her sometime, if you'd be comfortable with that." As Daniel prepared to leave, Isabella handed the shell back to him. "Please tell Emma that her daddy really is a hero. And Daniel, thank you for giving me back my life." Daniel had no idea who Isabella Carter really was until Emma's teacher mentioned seeing his picture in the newspaper the next morning. The headline read, "Local mechanic saves tech billionaire's life," accompanied by a photo someone had taken of Daniel performing CPR on the beach. "Isabella Carter," Mrs. Rodriguez exclaimed when Daniel picked up Emma from school. "She's one of the youngest female billionaires in the country. She founded Carter Tech when she was just 25. Daniel, you saved someone incredibly important." But the media attention that followed wasn't entirely positive. While some outlets praised Daniel as a good Samaritan hero, others focused on the dramatic wealth gap between him and Isabella, with speculation ranging from skeptical to cruel. "Gold digger spotted," read one particularly nasty blog post. "Mechanic saves billionaire, coincidentally becomes her new best friend. How convenient." The comments on social media were even worse, with people questioning Daniel's motives and suggesting he'd somehow orchestrated the entire rescue for personal gain. At the auto shop, Daniel's co-workers teased him mercilessly. "So when are you quitting this dump to live in her mansion?" asked Mike, the shop's longtime mechanic. "Don't forget us little people when you're rich and famous." The attention made Daniel deeply uncomfortable. He'd saved Isabella because it was the right thing to do, not because he wanted anything in return. The suggestion that he was somehow scheming to take advantage of her generosity felt like a betrayal of everything he believed in. When Isabella called to invite him and Emma to dinner, Daniel almost declined. "I don't want you to feel obligated," he said. "And honestly, all this media attention is making me uncomfortable. People are saying things." What kind of thing? Isabella asked, her voice sharp. That I'm just trying to take advantage of you. That I saved you because I knew who you were and what you could do for me. There was a long pause. Daniel, do you know what I was doing at the beach yesterday? Swimming? I was having a panic attack, Isabella said quietly. I'd just gotten out of a board meeting where several investors questioned my leadership because I'm a woman. I went to the beach to clear my head, and I guess I went out too far in the water. I was already struggling when the current caught me. Daniel felt his heart clench at the vulnerability in her voice. You didn't save me for money or publicity, Isabella continued. You saved me because you're a good man who doesn't think twice about helping someone in need. Don't let small-minded people make you doubt that. The situation came to a head when Richard Blackstone, a business rival who'd been trying to acquire Carter Tech for years, went on a popular business podcast to publicly question Isabella's judgment. She's clearly being manipulated by this mechanic, Richard said with disdain. A working-class man saves her life, and suddenly she's his best friend? It's textbook emotional manipulation. Isabella Carter didn't build $1 billion company by being naive, but grief and trauma can make people vulnerable to exploitation. The interview went viral with hashtags like GoldDiggerGate trending on social media. Isabella's response was swift and public. She called her own press conference, held not in a corporate boardroom, but at Daniel's auto shop, surrounded by the cars he worked on and the modest tools of his trade. Yesterday, a man named Richard Blackstone suggested that I'm being manipulated by the person who saved my life, Isabella began, her voice clear and strong. Let me be very clear about something. Daniel Hayes doesn't want my money. In fact, he's turned down every attempt I've made to thank him financially. She gestured to the garage around them. This man works 12-hour days to support his daughter and give her the best life he can. He doesn't need my charity, and he certainly doesn't need the opinion of people who think kindness must have an ulterior motive. Isabella reached into her purse and pulled out a small object, Emma's seashell, which she'd apparently had crafted into a pendant and was now wearing on a delicate gold chain. This shell was given to me by Daniel's 7-year-old daughter as a reminder of the day her daddy became a hero, Isabella said, holding up the pendant. It's worth more to me than any business deal, any stock option, any acquisition offer, because it represents something that money can't buy, a family that taught me what real wealth looks like. The room full of reporters fell silent as Isabella's voice grew emotional. Real wealth is having people who care about you for who you are, not what you can give them. It's knowing that if you're in trouble, someone will help you without expecting anything in return. Daniel Hayes and his daughter have given me something I thought I'd lost forever: faith in human goodness. The press conference marked a turning point in how the media covered their friendship. Instead of focusing on conspiracy theories and wealth disparities, journalists began highlighting the genuine connection between Daniel and Isabella and the positive impact their story was having on discussions about class, kindness, and community. Isabella began visiting the auto shop regularly, not for publicity, but because she genuinely enjoyed Daniel and Emma's company. She learned to appreciate the satisfaction of honest work and the pride Daniel took in fixing things with his own hands. I spend all day in boardrooms talking about market shares and profit margins, Isabella told Daniel one afternoon as she watched him rebuild an engine. This is the first place I've been in years where people do work that actually fixes things instead of just moving money around. Emma had taken to Isabella immediately, treating her not as a famous billionaire, but as daddy's friend who almost drowned. Isabella, who had no experience with children, was charmed by Emma's directness and curiosity. Why do you have so much money? Emma asked during one of their beach walks, with the blunt honesty only children possess. I created something that helps people communicate better, Isabella explained, and when lots of people use it, they pay me a little bit each. Oh, Emma said, nodding solemnly, like how Daddy fixes cars and people pay him, except you fix talking instead of engines. Isabella laughed, delighted by the 7-year-old's perspective. That's exactly right. I fix talking. As weeks passed, Daniel found himself looking forward to Isabella's visits with an anticipation that had nothing to do with her wealth and everything to do with her company. She was funny, intelligent, and surprisingly down-to-earth despite her success. More importantly, she treated Emma with genuine affection and respect. She's not what I expected a billionaire to be like, Daniel confided to his neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who watched Emma when he worked late. "What did you expect?" Mrs. Patterson asked with a knowing smile. "I don't know. Colder, I guess. More demanding. Someone who thought she was better than everyone else. Maybe money doesn't change people as much as we think," Mrs. Patterson suggested. "Maybe it just makes them more of what they already were." One evening, as the three of them sat on the beach watching the sunset, the same beach where their story had begun, Emma made an announcement that surprised both adults. "I made something for Isabella," she said, pulling a small object from her pocket. It was another seashell, this one painted with bright colors and glued to a piece of driftwood. "It says family," Emma explained, pointing to the careful letters she'd painted in red. "Because that's what we are now, right?" Daniel felt his breath catch as Isabella accepted the gift with tears in her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart," Isabella said softly. "I think that's exactly what we are." 1 year later, at the grand opening of the Hayes Family Auto Center, a state-of-the-art garage funded by Isabella's investment, but run entirely by Daniel, Isabella stood before a crowd of employees, customers, and local media. "A year ago, I nearly drowned in these waters," and she said, gesturing toward the nearby beach. "Daniel Hayes pulled me from the ocean and gave me back my life. But what I didn't realize then was that he and Emma would also give me back my faith in what truly matters." She held up Emma's painted seashell, now permanently displayed in the shop's office. "This represents the real treasure I found that day. A family that chose love over judgment, kindness over profit, and hope over fear."